Computer. Got the right microphone. All right, here we go. 3, 2, 1. Welcome back to the Saints and Alumni Show here on 88.3 The Saint. Happy Friday, everyone. I'm your host, Joe Framuso from the class of 2012, your host this week. Before we get into this week's interview, this week's guest, I want to remind everyone, you're listening to us on the air, but you can also find us on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere you get your podcasts. Just search the Saints and Alumni Show, subscribe. Every show we've done is on there in the past year and a half or so, and every show moving forward is on there. So please subscribe. Every time we upload a show, you'll see it there. This week on the show, we have Jennifer Matthews from the class of 2000. Good to see you. Good to be with you. How are you?
Hey, thanks for having me.
And thanks for coming on. Before we came on the air here, we were talking a little bit about what you do at FanDuel, which is, kind of really taken the state by storm since, the sports betting became legalized in the past, few months. But we'll get into that in the second segment here. One thing I want to do first is what we talk about with pretty much every guest we have on, especially those who have ties to Siena or went to Siena. Pretty much the first question I ask everyone. It's, in your case, it's, probably the late 90s. You're looking at colleges.
Oh, you're making me sound so old.
Hey, the 90s were great. 90s were great. It's still 1999 in my head. So, you know what? So it's the late 90s. You're a senior, junior in high school. You're trying to figure out where you want to spend the next 4 years and how you want to advance your education. Take us through what led you to Siena College.
Yeah. So you are correct. Late 90s. So I played volleyball in high school, and I knew I wanted to play in college and ideally play Division I. But one thing I knew about myself was that I liked a small classroom. I'm more of a classroom learner, and I knew with all the travel and games and whatnot, that was kind of where I was looking. And I was actually starting to, look into small schools because of that. I loved the Catholic school experience. Even though I grew up in public school environment, it was always something I was drawn to. But more importantly, I went to a volleyball camp one summer, and my instructor was playing for Siena. And I kept asking her about, tell me more. And just like her face always lit up when she spoke about it. And I was like, oh, interesting. So we put that on the list, put a couple of other MAC schools on the list, and started doing the tours. But I will tell you, I came to Siena. I visited a few other schools in the neighborhood, and I did not get out of the car for any other school after I saw Siena, because it's just so beautiful, right? I mean, you just, you went there, you worked there, the green lawns, right? The buildings, everything felt family. You look around at the time, all the students, everyone looked so happy. There was just something about it that felt like home. And it was actually, I think I committed to go to Siena even before Thanksgiving of my senior year. So I knew pretty early that's where I wanted to go. And I was lucky enough to play on the volleyball team, but it was always the first choice. I kind of just knew it felt like home when I got there. And the coaches, obviously I really connected with, and some of the girls that I met my junior year coming in, doing my overnights and stuff like that. So, yeah. And it's still something I think I probably said to you earlier, is even when I come back to campus, even if it's just a quick drive by or come to a wedding, right, or come to an alumni event, it still has that feeling. And I don't know if it's just the way the school is structured, architecturally, or just even though the campus has grown, it still has that small feeling. And candidly, one of the other things I did love about it, which now, being an adult talking with people, they still can't believe this, is that everyone lives on campus. And I truly believe that's why our friendships are still so strong now, 20 plus years later, because we were always together all the time. And it's hard for people that I talk to understand, like, wow, you didn't want to have a Greek life. You didn't want to be off campus. I was like, no, I didn't. Like, I wanted to go to school. I wanted to be around people. Didn't want to travel off campus, that kind of stuff. And so I think that was a lot of why I really wanted to go there. And then obviously ended up being, I still will say this, probably the best 4 years of my life.
I can attest to that as well. I feel like we hear very similar stories from a lot of people who come on this show. The feeling of home, the feeling of coming back and still feeling your home. Same thing with me. I mean, all my friends are still up here, and I moved back here after 10 years of being in TV news. I'm like, I think I'm going to go back to Albany. And then I found myself back here on campus. So it's, it really, it's that sense of, you belong here. You're always welcome back here. And yeah, like I said, you hit the nail right on the head. Something I also bring up when we talk about, memories of Siena and things that really stick out to people. Is there a specific memory or let's say a specific year of your time here that really sticks out to you that you still carry with you, like something that makes you smile when you think about it, in your day-to-day life now?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's probably a lot of little specifics, right? It's like, I remember there, like I said, I played volleyball. So that's a huge part of my 4 years, us going to the MAC championships, right? Us playing in the NCAA playing game. But even like when the basketball team went to the MAC championships and us all going to Pepsi Arena, things like that are always fun. But I think it's the little things, I think it's like, and I'm assuming it's still called Saga, but like when we were there, it was walking into Saga and seeing, the table of friends, or the table next to you is another group of friends. And it was, walking to class, and you always pass the same people going to a certain class that you wouldn't. It was living in the townhouses, living in the dorms. Like, I know I talked earlier about like feeling like home, but I think it is that sense of community and that friendships. And it's just like those little one-off moments with people at the school that you kind of think about, right? Like I wish I had a specific example, but I can vividly, close my eyes and remember sitting in my townhouse with my girlfriends, just talking about certain things. And like, still to this day, we talk about it. So it's just like that stuff where, because it was always such a good time, right? It was always, there's definitely, college is not easy by any means, but just remembering, like, you can just walk over to someone's dorm room, you can walk over to someone's townhouse, and everyone was always available, right? Like, we always were able just to sit on their couch and chat, or go for a walk, or go for a run or something. So it was, I know it's probably not the specific memory you're looking for, but for me, it's like this combination of memories that really just, when I think of the 4 years, like, it's not one thing that sticks out. It's just like this culmination of things that are really, I remember. And like I said, I still, with all the friends I have from Siena, I say it all the time. It's like, they're another family to me.
We're talking with Jennifer Matthews from the class of 2000. I guess to piggyback off that just a little bit, just to plug a few things about Siena. As you probably heard, top 50 most beautiful campus, thanks to Condé Nast Traveler. We had our biggest freshman class come in this past year, and obviously looking to continue to grow with new programs, new buildings. And that's, of course, thanks to the generosity of a lot of our donors. What do you think? Do you think those memories, not so much memories, but do you think those factors are still in play, that made you want to come here? Like, what do you think for a college, not so much college, a high school senior, high school junior now? What do you think is really attracting them after seeing all these changes at Siena, but, there's still that ultimate foundation of, Franciscan service, camaraderie, home. What do you think is really attracting them here?
Yeah. It's a different person too, right? There's social media, there's technology, things that didn't exist when I went to college, but I would think it's that family feel, that small school feel, where, once again, you're not just a number. I would think, in my mind, that's what's really attracting people. And it's right. And to your point, it's beautiful. There are so many schools that aren't as pretty, right? There's much larger schools, taller buildings, more concrete, which works for different types of people. But I would think, if I was an incoming freshman, or if I was a junior or senior looking at a school, that it would be more about feeling at home, like you're leaving your home that you've only known for 18 years, right? So it's like, it's a really hard transition for anybody, but feeling like, not that you're just one of a number in this huge sea of people. I think I would think that's part of a big part of why Siena has such, an increase in freshmen, like you just said, increase of students. Obviously all the sports are really good. That's another thing for people interested in playing or rooting for teams. A lot of people go to big schools because they want to be a part of that community. Siena athletics is phenomenal, always has been. And it's D1, right? That's, and then obviously there are the club teams and stuff, but it gives you an opportunity to still play at that high level. which you don't always get, right? You can't always get that opportunity to be, like I said, like this type of environment, this type of community, and still play Division I.
And I agree. And we're lucky to, be a D1 school, to be a MAC school. The MAC just had some incredible exposure thanks to that St. Peter's run in the NCAA tournament. So
we were their last loss, right? Before.
Yeah. So
See,
now everyone knows and remembers what the MAC is. And, on TV, obviously people talking about, oh yeah, Siena was, St. Peter's last loss, but it brought up memories. I mean, you talk about, the successful basketball teams of, the late 90s, early 2000s. In my era, the Fran McCaffrey years. So that comes back, and, it's good exposure for the MAC. It's good exposure for Siena. Jen, we're going to take a quick break. We got to, pay some bills. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about what you do at FanDuel. And I was reading a little bit about, what your position there is and how FanDuel was really just expanded, especially here in New York State. And we'll talk about that. We'll be right back here on 88.3 The Saint. This is the Saints and Alumni Show. Computer. What are these questions? All right, here we go. 3, 2, let me start this count. 3, 2, 1. Welcome back to the Saints and Alumni Show here on 88.3 The Saint. Once again, you can find us wherever you get your podcasts. Just search the Saints and Alumni Show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. We would talk with Jennifer Matthews from the class of 2000. We, in our first segment, kind of talked about your journey to Siena, what Siena means to you, how you show your love of Siena to others. But your journey after Siena has been pretty cool. And it's, in my opinion, you're now with probably one of the most talked about and biggest companies when it comes to sports and sports betting, and that's FanDuel. So if you've watched any sporting event anywhere, especially, in probably late December, early January, when, the sports betting, online sports betting became, a thing here in New York, what FanDuel is. So let's go back. So let's talk a little bit about your journey to FanDuel. I mean, you said you were a volleyball player here on campus, have a sports background. What ultimately leads you to this company? Yeah.
So I was a marketing major at Siena. That's the one thing I always knew I wanted to do. And Siena had, back then you can go to the resource center and go to job fairs, look up where they were. So I went to a job fair down through Time Inc. They invited a bunch of us. So we went and interviewed there. And a few weeks later, actually got a call from Sports Illustrated, who was a part of Time Inc., asking if I was interested in interviewing. And I did. And long story short, got the job as, very, very low level out of college, started, I think, 3 or 4 weeks after graduation. So pretty soon. And, listen, I was lucky. I love sports. I've always loved sports. So starting in that field was amazing. And then obviously kind of moving, but, I leveraged my network at Sports Illustrated. I was there for, I think it was 6 years, moved over to ESPN, kind of to learn that television side of the business. Cause at the time, Sports Illustrated was primarily print and digital. And then, the funny thing is I left sports after ESPN. I actually went over to MSNBC to launch their Lean Forward campaign at the time. And, everybody questioned, why are you leaving sports? Why are you leaving sports? And for me, it was just the opportunity from a marketing perspective to actually learn how to launch and brand a new network, which I just knew I would never have that opportunity there. And, that kind of led me back to sports because I missed it. It's just something I have a passion for. It's, just a part of who I am. And, had a few stops along the way. And a couple of years back, I actually moved down to DC and went to work for Monumental Sports Entertainment. Monumental is essentially the Madison Square Garden of DC. So they own an NHL team, an NBA team, WNBA, an arena, the whole nine. And the owner at the time was like, listen, we're at a new generation of sports fans. People aren't necessarily coming to games like they used to, but we still need to figure out a way to, engage with them. So I actually went there to be, I think I was their number 2 or number 3 employee on their OTT platform. So their streaming network and streaming Mystics games and some original content and event series, this whole thing that we kind of built as this first local sports streaming network, which was phenomenal. But the whole reason of doing this was knowing that sports betting would become legalized sometime. And when it did become legalized, we would then be adding in odds into game broadcasts, into streaming, wherever it might be. So my boss at the time kind of had that insight, that look into like, this is where the future is going. And that's kind of where I got my feet wet with sports betting. And so after Monumental, I moved back to New York to work for PointsBet, which is also an Australian-based sports betting company. They too are legal in most states, but was there for about 2 years or so. And then, I got the opportunity to come over to FanDuel. FanDuel is America's #1 sports book. So it's kind of that no-brainer. Just to grow and see what it's like to work at, the #1 guy. I mean, it's a totally different, when you're the big one in the space, it's a lot different than being one of the smaller ones. So right now I'm the VP of brand strategy. So I oversee our brand team, which consists of like all the commercials that you see on TV that you're mentioning, that comes out of me and my team, digital, all that kind of stuff. And then, what is our strategy in new states? How are we going after this? What are we thinking about? I also oversee our social team. So everything you see across all our social channels, our creative operations team, which is essentially every piece of creative that goes out the door comes through my team of kind of managing the process there. And then I also own product marketing. So same game parlays, like trying to teach people what that is, right? Looking at popular parlays, cash out, all that kind of stuff. So it's looking holistically at the brand and what matters to what type of sports bettor, right? Because there's new sports bettors, to your point. New York is relatively new in the space of legalized. And when I say new, it's new, there's definitely people who've been offshore betting for years. I mean, that happens. But we're talking to some people who don't understand sports betting at all. Then I'm talking to some people who do understand it. Some people who have been with competitors. Now they're switching to us. There's so many levels of actual sports bettors. So it's really thinking about that. Who are we talking to for different? So like, for instance, our March Madness campaign, which you may have seen all the commercials that we produced, focused on cash out. Cash out is, thinking about March Madness being such a huge time for bettors from all over the place trying to get into the game. It's a little easier, right? I always had a bracket with my coworkers. Now I kind of want to dabble and do something else. It's kind of making you feel as if, oh, wow, this doesn't feel as scary. There's not as much risk. I could always cash out if my team is winning, or if they're losing, I don't want to lose too much. I can cash out. And then NBA playoffs, which is happening now. We also just kicked off. You'll start to see our commercial that we just did with Charles Barkley and Chris Redd from SNL.
Oh, cool.
And they too are talking about cash out and just kind of adding that excitement to the playoffs, but also that, the fun of, and if you know Charles Barkley and you watch him on TNT, he knows it all. He's the best bettor. He's going to tell you what, So it's fun to watch him kind of in this situation talking about like, ooh, maybe I'm doubting some of the things I'm betting on. I have the option to cash out. So that's kind of how I got to FanDuel, what I'm currently doing at FanDuel. But yeah, it's an amazing space. It's I say to people all the time that what I love about it as a marketer is that nothing has ever been done before. So we're still trying to figure it out. Working at other types of brands, maybe in the, customer service side of the business, or more food side of the business, quick service, whatever it is. Like, it's been around for so long, you kind of know what works, what kind of marketing works, what kind of marketing doesn't work. But for us, it's more like we don't know. We're still testing. We're still trying to figure it out. So it's been a nice little ride thus far. I mean, it's crazy. No day is the same, but that's what I kind of like about it.
We're talking with Jennifer Matthews, class of 2000. Vice President of Brand Strategy at FanDuel. Yes, that FanDuel, you know exactly what we're talking about. You've seen it everywhere. A quick aside, you talk about, exposure and partnerships. Like, I watch an SNY game. I'm trying to watch the Mets, and you mentioned PointsBet before. There it is in the bottom of the screen. They have a partnership with SNY. They have a deal with
NBC and MBS.
So it's like, if James McCann makes a hit tonight, which he won't, but you may get this amount of money. Off camera.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, everything, as you say, like everything now you'll see, right? I mean, I'm sure people in New York were bombarded in January with every other commercial being a different sports book. And I know how annoying it is, but this is the game we're in, right? We all got to get market share, and that's just kind of how it is. And listen, the leagues have opened it up, right? The NFL has allowed us to be one of their official partners. This is something the NFL would have never touched years ago. So I think everyone's kind of understanding the value it has, and it actually helps with engagement, especially from the league perspective, right? Because that last free throw of any game means nothing to you if you're just winning, like, you know, oh, my team's going to win. But now that you can have something on every single part of that game, it's pretty fascinating.
We were talking before we started recording our show today. It was that last Cooper Cup touchdown in the Super Bowl that meant everything for me. So also off camera, we were talking about your feature here in our upcoming Siena News magazine. If you're watching us on YouTube, you'll see it right here. Alumni and friends out there in the community, these magazines should be hitting your mailboxes very soon. Take a look at I'll tell you what page, 21.
Cool. Lucky 21. See, legalized sports betting.
Yep. So so we talk a little bit about, and we have a few minutes left, so we can dip into this just a little bit. Sports betting, you know, online sports betting becoming legal in New York just a couple months ago, and exposure is everywhere. How has that changed what you've done in terms of like getting that word out? I mean, you said, you know, it is everywhere now. You're trying new strategies, you're trying new things to, especially, you know, teach people what this is, what it's all about. How has that really changed what you've done?
So it's funny, one of the initiatives I'm actually working pretty closely on is our responsible gaming. So, you know, it's about, yes, I want to get people to bet, but I want them to do it responsibly, because there is a lot of negative stigma towards gambling, right? So degenerates and all this kind of stuff, and I can get in trouble and lose my house and my family and my car and blah, blah, blah. So FanDuel actually has a bunch of things in place that you can, so this doesn't happen, right? So you can go on the app and you can set a time limit. You can set an amount limit that you can deposit or that you can bet each day, right? There's things that we're working on. We're going to start doing a college tour with Craig Carton, who is our ambassador in the RG space. So, you know, legalized sports betting talks about one thing, and we're trying to get people in the door to bet, but there's also that other side that, like, we really want to make sure this is done responsibly, because when it stops becoming fun, that's not what we're here for, right? It's just another part of the social. It's like you were saying, you hit a multi-leg parlay for the Super Bowl. That's fun. You're texting your buddies, you're telling them that. So that's what FanDuel and like other sports books and sports betting is allowing that social side of it, but you just have to be careful, right? So that's something that we're just really cognizant of, making sure that people know that it doesn't have to get out of hand, right? Like, I know, you know, and this is, it's there to help.
Yep. And I'm thankful for FanDuel, not only for that parlay, but it helped me forget about the 13 seconds from the Buffalo Bills just a couple weeks prior. So thanks to you, and thanks to FanDuel, because it was very good for me. A wealth of information. We've run out of time. We've learned so much about your position, what FanDuel does. Alumni out there, friends of Siena out there, if you're seeing something FanDuel related, Jennifer is behind it. She's driving this brand, and not being biased, you're doing a phenomenal job, because I see it everywhere. Just it taught me kind of, you know, what sports betting is. I came into this, you know, kind of unfamiliar with it. And in all honesty, like, FanDuel was the first, and I think the only app I have on my phone, just because of my familiarity with the brand.
Love to hear this.
So, and not just throwing that out there, like, you know me, like we've said this before, coming from broadcasting and journalism, like constantly just, okay, what's the best way? What's this? It was a no-brainer for me for FanDuel. So thank you for what you do. Thank you for keeping the Saint spirit alive out there in your community. And thank you for being a Saint.
Of course. Thanks, Joe. Thanks for having me.
Of course. That's it for this week's episode of the Saints and Alumni Show. Once again, I'm Joe Formusa, class of 2012. I want to thank our guests again for this week, Jennifer Matthews from the class of 2000. Stay tuned to 88.3 The Saint. We will be right back.